In July 2026, the famous Bayeux Tapestry made the headlines because the embroidery depicting the Norman conquest of England was displayed in the UK at the British Museum for the first time in almost 1,000 years. But something else happened quite recently. A fragment of the Bayeux Tapestry had been discovered in Germany in the Schleswig-Holstein state archives and returned to France. Turns out that the Nazis themselves were a bit obsessed with this cultural artifact in a real-life Indiana Jones episode. Let's find out why. And the episode is called Sonderauftrag Bayeux, the Special Operation Bayeux. The obsession is linked with a structure called the Ahnenerbe, roughly translated as the inheritance of the ancestors, a pseudoscientific organization founded by Heinrich Himmler's Schutzstaffel in Nazi Germany in 1935. It was supposed to work as an appendage devoted to promoting racial theories, and it gathered academics and scientists who fostered the idea that Germans descended from a superior Aryan race dating back to prehistoric times. Scholars like the Dutch-German Hermann Wirth were convinced that only by reclaiming a supposed ancestral heritage would the modern-day Germans be able to return to their original glory, and similar ideological rubbish mixed with mysticism and esoteric endeavors to recover some kind of hidden spiritual roots of the primeval Nordic Germanic people. Rubbish some people still promote today. With the beginning of World War II, the Society Ahnenerbe directed its research activities to the occupied lands. In particular, Himmler was determined to legitimize the Nazi regime's claim on these areas by proving their inherent Germanism. So the SS and Ahnenerbe members scoured Eastern and Western European territories, searching for every artifact that might enforce the Society's racial theories and propaganda aims. As Shirley Ann Brown notes in History Extra, in July 1939, a memo written by Franz Altheim, professor of classical philology at the Frankfurt University, arrived on the desk of Wolfram Sievers, the general manager of Ahnenerbe. It proposed that a detailed examination of the Bayeux Tapestry would prove that the Normans who conquered England were in reality Vikings and, by extension, Germanic. So Normans, Vikings, Germanic peoples, regardless of the region and of the century, they were all lumped together and they were all the ancestors of modern-day Germans. By Himmler's time, the Bayeux Tapestry had been stored in the town of Bayeux in Normandy for centuries. From at least 1476, it was held in the cathedral and occasionally displayed. Its location before that is a bit of a supposition. It may initially have been created for the consecration of the cathedral itself in the late 11th century, and thus it would have been there ever since it was stitched together. But not everyone agrees with that. The tapestry briefly left Bayeux in the early 19th century when Napoleon had it moved to Paris as a propaganda tool to support his intended invasion of Britain. So you can see this artifact has been a propaganda machine from the very beginning, and the tradition continued in modern times. But the invasion never happened, and after being displayed in 1804, the tapestry was returned to Bayeux, where it stayed until World War II. After the fall of France in 1940, the Nazis were finally able to set in motion their special interest in the embroidery. Dr. Herbert Jankun, professor of Viking archaeology at Rostock University, was sent to Bayeux with a team of experts to carry out a detailed study. The French did try to obstruct the Nazi investigation, but eventually the tapestry was moved to a monastery outside Bayeux, where it could be unrolled and photographed. The team worked through the summer of 1941, and then the tapestry was moved to Château de Sourches, which is about 170 kilometers south of Bayeux. It would appear that, to a large extent, the act of producing an illustrated study and dispatching researchers to the original textile would have been enough to claim the object as a monument of Germanic Aryan supremacy. It is quite clear that perceived Scandinavian influence through the Norman connection within the tapestry's design was to be central to the study's conclusions. However, the project was not completed. Herbert Jeschke, an artist from Berlin, was commissioned to create full-size drawings and watercolors of the tapestry. In 2019, Jeschke's archive was gifted to the city of Bayeux, and it seems that he removed some fragments and threads from the tapestry in the course of his work. Another member of the team was Dr. Karl Schlabo, a textile expert and head of the Germanic Costume Museum in Neumünster, whose job was to scrutinize the fabric and take measurements. While he was doing this, it seems that he removed a small piece of the tapestry and appropriated it for his own personal research, although it sounds more like a little trophy. The fragment mounted in a small glass case is the one discovered in the Schleswig-Holstein State Archives during the cataloguing of Schlabo's documents. So, one more example of Nazi looted artifacts. The way was paved then for its return to the Bayeux Museum, and it may have already been transferred. Though initial reports suggested that Schlabo removed this fragment when the embroidery was later transferred by the Nazis to Paris, it is more likely that he did so during June 1941, when he and his fellow members of Sonderauftrag Bayeux were stationed at the exact spot. In a sketch by Herbert Jeschke, the artist depicted himself with Schlabo and Herbert Jankuhn, the director of the project, hunched over the tapestry, and the sketch is accompanied by a very emphatic title, Die Tapisserie, with exclamation mark, an expression of delight at their privileged viewing of the medieval masterpiece they got their racist hands on. The Nazi investigation of the tapestry also included a photographic survey, and in 1942, Himmler was presented with a bound volume of photographs and drawings derived from the 1941 work at the Château de Sourches. The tapestry stayed at the chateau until June 1944. Following the D-Day landings, the Gestapo moved the Bayeux tapestry to the Louvre in Paris for safekeeping, and in August 1944, just days before the liberation of the city, Himmler ordered its transfer to Germany, believing it to be, of course, a significant piece of Aryan heritage. However, British codebreakers intercepted the directive and alerted the French resistance. Now, the exact details of how the resistance intervened are unclear, but the military governor of Paris may have taken measures to delay or prevent the SS from carrying out their orders, ensuring that the tapestry remained in the Louvre. Happily, this means that the tapestry was eventually restored to Bayeux. Now, I think this is a very relevant and timely example of how history, in this case a very specific artifact, can be used and abused and instrumented for extremist political purposes long after its creation, and how meanings and interpretations can change in different contexts, especially when certain political needs dictate it. So I hope you found out something new and interesting today. If you want actual history and archaeology of the Viking Age, this might be the place to look for it. I also made a video about Odinism, by the way, a very unfortunate right-wing offshoot of Nordic paganism. So that's what I would watch next. It's kind of like linked to the topic. Paid memberships help this history project a lot, so if you could spare a couple of pennies a month, that would be absolutely amazing. My deepest gratitude to those of you already doing it, and I really hope I can stick around. This was Irina. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.